Welcome everyone to CABA's quarterly CHC webinar meeting. My name is Marta Klopotowska and I am the Manager of Programs and Communications at CABA. I'll be emceeing the slides today. I'd like to mention that today's webinar meeting is being recorded and will be circulated for those who could not attend. And with that, I'll pass it on to Greg, who will go over the agenda for today.
Hi, Marta. Can you just go to the next slide? All right. Thanks a lot. I'm Greg Walker. I'm the CEO of CABA. I'm just going to briefly go over the agenda and then do a call for a motion to appoint our new chair of the CHC. So one is I guess agenda item number one is the agenda. So we did this one, appointment of the new CHC chair, and then there'll be a call to order, a welcome and introductions from the new chair. Some administrative items where we're looking for making a call for some vice chairs, approving the past minutes, and then making a call for new keynote presentations for future events. And following that, we'll do a research update for the CHC research project, landmark research for 2022, and what progress we're making on that. And then next we'll start talking about our new podcast series. We're doing a podcast series both in intelligent buildings and connected homes. So if there's anyone who's interested in being on a host or a guest on a podcast, we'll talk about that at that time when they reach out. You can reach out to Marta. And then we'll have a keynote presentation looking to the future, context aware connected spaces from Phil from NICE North America. And then we'll go over a white paper subcommittee update from Ken Wax, go over some new business and some announcements of some of the upcoming events that are in our space and some of the past events that you may have missed, and give a brief on those. So if we go to the next slide. So this slide is to officially appoint our new CHC chair. So we did some review of and made a call for a CHC chair, and Ken Wax put his name out there, and we've known Ken Wax for many years. I've known him for many years, and he's been involved in CABA for even more than that. So he's really a key figure in the connected home space as well as intelligent buildings, and he has a focus on energy as well. I won't read this large bio that's on the screen here, but maybe Ken, if you want to say a few words about yourself before we do the official motion.
Well, thank you very much, Greg, for inviting me to be considered as chair of the Connected Home Council. I have admired the work of CABA since I first learned about CABA about more than 30 years ago. CABA has had a very unique position of providing useful information without dealing with all the developments and disputes and competition that goes on in this branch of consumer electronics. It's been an exciting roller coaster we've all gone through, and we're seeing the fruits of our labors in a very successful industry. I've been running a management consulting practice since those early days of home automation. My business specializes in home control, building automation systems, and energy management with a focus on the consumer, especially in the energy space where consumers now have many options for generating power from wind and solar and from storing power. In addition to my private client work, I chair the International Standards Committee developing the world's standards to promote industrial development and trade. This is being run by ISO and IEC in Geneva, Switzerland. And I also chair the Standards Committee for the Consumer Technology Association and the American National Standards Institute, focusing on energy management. So as usual, CABA has put together an excellent program that I'm sure you'll enjoy. As always, we have an outstanding featured speaker, and I will introduce him shortly. So, Greg, thank you very much for the invitation.
Thanks a lot, Ken. I can think of no better individual to be considered for this position. So with that, I'll go and I'll see if there's someone that wants to make a motion to approve Ken as officially as the CHC chair. This could be anybody on the call.
Greg, I'll make that motion. It's Charles.
Okay. And is there any seconder?
This is Pete. Pete Horton. I'll second that.
All right. Are there any opposed? Okay. Well, the unopposed motion is approved, and you've been officially appointed, Ken. And I'll let you take over the rest of the meeting. But I before you leave, I'd definitely like to thank Eric Harper, our former chair of the CHC, for all his good work in helping to organize some of these CHC meetings and the keynote presentations. He's actually been elected to the executive of our board of directors, and with that is sort of freeing up some time to take on different initiatives within CABA. But I'd like to thank Eric for all his good work as the chair of the CHC committee.
Well, Eric, this is Ken. I wanted to add my thanks for creating an excellent environment, and I hope I can fill your shoes in this role.
I know we're in good hands. Thanks, Ken. And thank you, Greg.
Thank you. So I'd like to add my welcome to Greg, to everyone here at the Connected Home Council. Tell you briefly what we do. As you can see, we have a summary of our activities. We've been around, and it's kind of amazing that we're now approaching 20 years. We try to look out to see where the industry is going, to provide you a broad perspective. That's one of the advantages of CABA, where CABA is not beholden to any one particular company. CABA is not promoting any particular technology, but in general is advancing the goals of our industry. So we're looking for new technologies, new opportunities in consumer electronics and broadband services to support the connected home market. To this end, we have pretty consistently put together a set of webinars at each meeting that explores various topics, some of which dovetails with research that CABA is connecting, and some that introduces new areas that could be of interest to your business or could lead to some future CABA collaborative research. Our goal is to promote our industry, and our industry is to make the world of connected home applications more useful to the occupants. And as it says on the summary here, we're looking to make the connected home more flexible, adaptable, and human-centric. For some administrative matters, we keep minutes of each meeting. The minutes are available, as you can see on the screen, at the CHC portion of the CABA website. So I ask for approval of the minutes from August 16th, early this year. We'd like someone to propose approval, a motion to approve the minutes.
This is Chris Larry. I motion to approve.
Thank you, Chris. And Marta, I assume you've asked me to make sure we've got the names. So is Chris Larry moved, and who would like to second? We have 38 people. Not everyone is that shy. So let's hear one more to second the approval of the minutes.
Hey, Ken, this is Pete Horton. I second.
Thank you, Pete. So I assume we have no one opposed. Give you a moment. I'll count to 5. Does anyone oppose? Hearing none, then the motion passes. The minutes are approved. It's customary for CABA to have about 2 or 3 vice chairs for every one of the committees. We're currently fortunate to have Charles Hume, the Director of Emerging Technologies at Southwire, as vice chair. We're looking for volunteers for 1 or 2 additional vice chairs. So we're not putting you on the spot right now, but any of you who would like to offer your services, please contact Martha or Greg and let us know who you are, and we're glad to add you to the roster as a vice chair of the Connected Home Council. We always look for presenters who have some useful information to share with us. As you see, we have a speaker lined up for today, but if anyone is interested in a similar role at future meetings, including the next meeting, please let us know. Best way is to contact Greg or Martha. Of course, I'm always available if you'd like to discuss any home systems related issues with me, and maybe determine if you think it's appropriate for a CABA audience. Just reach out to me. The easiest way to find me is at kenwax.com. You'll find my contact info there, KENWACKS.com. So let me turn now to Greg, who will tell you about the research that CABA does through a collaborative program.
Thanks, Ken. So every year we do a research project through the Connected Home Council. We call these landmark research projects, where we pool the funds from some of our members. And this year's research project was selected by the board to be smart home energy management. And these are the funders that we have on the screen. The Thread Group is our newest funder. We're looking to launch the project in I think December 15th is our first steering committee meeting of the group, and we'll be completing it in early 2023. And it's going to look at some really barriers towards adoption, significant trends in the industry as it relates to smart home energy management, inhibitors to growth, some opportunities and business cases that are to look forward in terms of smart home energy management. We did a 10,000 foot really broad level prospectus that we put on the website. It's going to be narrowed down even further when we get to those first steering committee meetings. Harbor Research was selected to do this research project through an RFP process, and it's around $70,000 worth of research. And if you want to get the full research, you can join and get the full research for $5,000. If you want to join the steering committee and shape the research, get some updates, vet some of the final materials, and also get an additional webinar for your organization, that would be the $10,000 level. That's the most popular. But if you'd like more information on this research, if your organization would like to get involved, it's a good way to get cost-effective research and in a collaborative nature. But you can definitely send me an email at walker@caba.org, and I can provide you a little bit more details about the project and walk you through some of the next steps and about how to get involved. Does anyone have any questions about this particular research?
Well, thank you, Greg. I think this is one of the really hot subjects now that I'd encourage people to consider energy management at home is very important. And as you may know, the state of California is now mandating that new homes include distributed energy resource in terms of solar panels. So next, Marta will introduce our featured speaker today. Marta?
Actually, Ken, I'm going to be going through the podcast before we have Charles introduce the speaker.
Okay.
So earlier this year, CABA started a podcast series on intelligent buildings and connected homes. And each episode is pre-recorded and released quarterly on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Our most recent recording on connected homes, titled Extending the Smart Grid to Consumers, was hosted by CABA's IBC Chair Bob Allen, and with our newly appointed CHC Chair Ken Wax as the guest. It's a great episode. I encourage everyone to listen. You can actually go onto the website, onto caba.org/podcast, and we'll have the two there. We'll be posting, I believe, a new one in January. And we're getting a lot of good feedback, a lot of great feedback. We're getting a lot of interest in terms of guests and hosts. So definitely let us know if this is something of interest to you. You can contact me on the screen there, my email address at klopotowska@caba.org, or you can also reach out to me through the chat as well on the meeting. If there's some interest, I can send over some information, or we can schedule a meeting just to discuss some further details. And then as well, as I mentioned, if you want to just visit our website, caba.org, to listen to the recently recorded episodes. And with
Marta,
that,
if I could add that, I want to tell those who would like consider volunteering to be a featured speaker on a podcast that it doesn't require a lot of preparation, because Bob Allen is very good at coming up with methods of eliciting useful information from the podcast speakers. We worked off a very rough outline and filled the 30-minute period without much difficulty. So this will not be a major investment of your time in preparation, and you'll have an enjoyable session in discussion with Bob.
that's right. And I do want to mention that we've actually received some more interest from other hosts as well, and it'll be a very similar, fairly similar process as well. And it's not just for anybody who wants to appear as a guest. If you have some experience in hosting, or would like to take a stab at hosting an episode, we encourage you to reach out. We could go through the details and let you know how it all works. Process is very simple. Really, all you need is a platform that can record audio and or video as well. So it's not too difficult at all.
And remember, this is not going out live, so if there's any slips, they can be edited.
That's correct. That's right. We will be able to edit it. You can edit it on your end, or we can edit it on our end as well. And that's all from me, Ken.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn it over to Charles to introduce our webinar.
Thank you very much, Ken, and thank you, Greg and Marta. So today, I'm very excited to have Paul Williams here, Chief Product Officer at NICE North America. He will explore context-aware spaces and what they mean to the custom install industry. The massive growth of IoT has produced an overwhelming flow of data and services, which has shifted access control paradigm from a fixed desktop environment to dynamic cloud environments. This, combined with advances in sensor technology and artificial intelligence, has made complex deployments more feasible. Ultimately, by using these sensors, anyone from homeowners to enterprises can create context awareness that leverages device adaptive learning with a building environment that learns our habits, behaviors, and preferences and operates autonomously to provide the optimal solution. So very relevant to Connected Home Council. A little bit about Paul. Paul Williams is a visionary leader with a proven track record of leading organizations to high growth results through building teams with clear objectives and support of the overall vision. Paul's career spans from startups to Fortune 500 companies. He joined NICE North America, where he serves as Chief Product Officer. In this role, he leads product management teams and develops the product roadmap across all brands. Paul excels at aligning real-world problems and anticipating customer needs to create unique and innovative solutions. Paul previously served as GE's Lighting General Manager of Product Management and Growth, where he was charged with reimagining lighting solutions. In 3 years, Paul's team created a DIY smart home ecosystem with innovative products and scaled the consumer mobile app, taking it from just 30,000 users to more than 2 million. During his 14 years of executive leadership at Control4, a manufacturer of smart home solutions, he was instrumental in building the company from a startup to an IPO with double-digit year-over-year growth. Paul holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Southern New Hampshire University, where he graduated summa cum laude. So Paul, I will turn it over to you, and I will tell the audience, please ask your questions in the chat and Q&A. We will have 10 minutes at the end of the presentation to answer questions. So with that, Paul, I will turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction.
Sure.
So let me pull up. That. All right. So hopefully everybody's seeing my presentation right now. Yes?
It is there. Yep.
Excellent. Good. All right. First step accomplished. We're live in here. So thanks for the introduction again. Pleasure to be with you, either in your afternoon or your morning, depending on where you're at on the continent.
Paul, we see the preview of each slide at the bottom. Can you
I'm going to have to switch the swap displays there.
Oh yeah, we're looking at this. There you
go. That's
better.
right.
There we go. Status swap displays there. All right. Much better. All right. So once again, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're at. Love talking to this group. A lot of good activity that I've watched over the years. So as mentioned, my topic is going to be looking at the future. The good news is it's really not the too distant future. This is something that I've been looking for after nearly 2 decades in the smart home. The thing that we dreamed about were some of the things I'm going to talk to you about today. And we're not that far off, as you'll see as we talk through it a little bit. And I'm pretty excited about the kind of what I'll call this next generation for the smart home and smart spaces. So before we talk about the future, though, let's talk a little bit about the past, because it's important. It's contextually, both from this contextual awareness, but also from understanding where we have come from to understand where we're going. And there's a lot of things that have really happened. If I look over even just the last 15 years, certainly in the smart home and in technology in general, that really lead into where we're heading into the future. There are too many to mention. If I mentioned all of the developments that have happened, we could spend 30 minutes just talking about the developments over the last 15 years and probably longer. But I'm going to hone in on a couple of things that I think are a few things that are really leading us into this next generation of contextually aware spaces, and that is, first of all, the mobile devices and having mobile computing at our fingertips at all points during the day. In fact, we just passed in June, 15 years ago, the iPhone was released. In ways, it seems like a long time ago. In other ways, it doesn't seem that long ago as well. So that in itself changed the complexity, or actually changed it to make it more simple, but also changed the world for the smart home. I was involved in smart home before we had these devices, and at that time it was remote controls and touch panels and on-screen displays, and that was pretty much what you had. If you wanted to remote, a lot of people are setting up VPNs to be able to remote into their homes, to be able to control or even to monitor what was going on in the home. We've come a long way since then. The other things that have happened is some development around cloud computing. So cloud computing has offered a lot of capability for us to take parts of complex processing and push those into an environment where it's easier for that work to be done. But at the same time, as you'll see here in a second, we've also done a lot to do edge computing, and there's a lot of work that's been done there. Voice control. One of the things that, I remember watching the Jetsons as a young boy, watching the Jetsons, and they were talking into these devices, and things were happening, and the system was talking back, and thinking about how you're going to control this device or your home with voice. It was kind of alluring and exciting. And then it happened. We then got into voice control. And voice control has become a big part of what consumers expect, certainly in home control, but in their general lives as well. And then IoT. has both been, I would say, a great thing and also a distracting thing from the smart home perspective. We have seen just a plethora of devices as we started into the age of IoT, and everything was connected. Everything had an app that connected to it. Even things that shouldn't have an app connected to them were suddenly connected. And the good news is that over time, we've seen the consumers really adopt the things that are important and add value and bring value back to them. We've seen those devices get adopted into the homes, and the things that don't have value either don't get used or don't get purchased. And so that has a self-filtering on it that takes some of the confusion out of the world with IoT. But one of the confusions it did create is that we've got 5 million apps that you have, and so if you wanted to piece together a smart home system in the past with IoT, consumers were it wasn't for the faint of heart. Consumers would sometimes have 15, 16 apps to control the devices in their home. None of them talk together. It was a very confusing environment for most consumers trying to get into the smart home. Luckily, we've passed that a little bit, and we're starting to see the work that happens around ecosystems that are being built. Some of those very voice control systems that you see there, but then others as well. If we talk about the now and what's happening, we've taken the IoT world in kind of the next phase here. And these IoT devices, or these connected devices, include sensors that have the capability of not only detecting an event or being able to monitor what's happening, but also to understand more in a very intelligent way of what's happening. we're getting to the place now where we can start to understand who physically is in a space and where are they located in that space. And there's some exciting technology like mmWave, for example, was one of those. There's also some work being done around Wi-Fi, in fact, to be able to detect where people are within spaces, who those people are within those spaces, and where they are. When we start to understand that, it starts to open up the world of possibility for how we get into this contextually aware space. Because now understanding who's in the home, who's in that space, where they're at, and more about that person or what's happening, the more we can do to try to understand what we need to do in that space. And then AI, huge. In fact, I hate using the phrase AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. They get overused quite a bit, but the technology itself is very, very valuable. If we boil it down to simplicity here, if we think about that in our smart spaces, in our smart home spaces, the advantages that we get to understand not only about the detection I was talking to you about earlier, but also to understand behaviors and patterns and try to understand what's happening. And then from that, then be able to anticipate based on prior history or prior environments or prior inputs, what needs to happen next, and try to then understand what we would then do, which then leads us into the world of the future. And as mentioned, I don't believe the not too distant future, because honestly, companies working in this direction right now. And this is the contextually aware spaces. And when we start to talk about this, I wanted to walk you through, well, what does that mean? What does it do? And the best way that I found to be able to help people understand what a contextually aware connected space might look like is to show some examples, or at least talk through some examples of what that might be. So let's talk about this in different ways. Well, first of all, start on entertainment and convenience. So as mentioned, if we can detect who's in the space and where they're in the space, we can then start to learn with using AI. And that AI doesn't need to be in the cloud necessarily. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of work done in the cloud, but there's also been a lot of work done on being able to make that happen at the edge. And so a lot of AI that can be handled at the edge. Some of that sometimes need to go to the cloud, but it can come back, and only pieces that need to be handled in the cloud get handled in the cloud. That also ensures some of this privacy and security concern, which has become a big concern and honestly is a concern for consumers. And so that's the way we're able to handle that as we move into the future. But if we talk about the entertainment and convenience category here, we can tell what's happening. We understand patterns. From there, we can even understand, how do they like to be entertained? And what are the things that lead up to that entertainment? So as people move through spaces, we can turn on and off audio video systems based on the learned behavior. It's 5 p.m. at night. When I walk into that space at 5 p.m. at night, it's learned, the house has learned that I like soft jazz, and it would make suggestions to me. One of the things we found early on in smart home. I think this is a valuable concept when it comes to this as well. Early on, as we started into the smart home and professionally installed systems, we'd find integrators and dealers would do all kinds of crazy programming sometimes for consumers, where you triple tap a button and this happens, you quad push the button, another thing happens, or things were based on time of day. And what you got were consumers that felt uncomfortable because the house was in control. They'd walk into a space and something would happen. They're like, I don't know what just happened and why it's happening. Or they press the button and think they pressed it twice, but they press it 3 times, something else happens. And it was very confusing. And so we need to try to avoid that in the future. And the way that we can avoid that is by making sure that we're allowing the consumer to be in control of that space. So we think about this in the way that it could be presented is in a way that would be more of like a suggestion, rather than just saying, hey, I've learned this behavior and I'm just going to start doing it. More along the lines, hey, Paul, I've noticed that when you walk into the space at 5 p.m. every night, you listen to soft jazz. Do you want me to just start that every time you walk in the room between these hours? Do you want soft jazz to play? And if we can do it in that way, and then also allow the consumer to have control over that, if they decide that in the future they don't want that to happen, that can also occur. But also, if I started to change that, and now I've changed to, I don't know, gangster rap at 5 p.m. because I want to get really alert during the late afternoon hours, then maybe that's a learned behavior that it learns over time, and then asks me, do I want to change from soft jazz because it's happened enough? Change to that gangster rap or hard rock or whatever it is I want to listen to. But by doing this, I think we're starting to unlock some capability that really we have a hard time in the pro install world being able to deliver to a consumer, and that is an evolving home, and that evolving home changing around consumers' behaviors. I've had the pleasure and the dismay sometimes to walk into homes that were done, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and had the smart home solution put in them. And the programming that's in place 10 years later is the same programming that was put in 10 years ago. And that dynamic for that family, the dynamic for the people living in that home has changed dramatically over that 10 years. Think about your own habits and behaviors. Most of us change that over time. Some are creatures of habit. We keep the same habits over and over, but their homes are changing and evolving spaces. People spend more time in other spaces than the other spaces they were in before. The makeup of the family changes. Kids move out, kids move back in, they move in with grandchildren. All kinds of things happen with that space. And the home doesn't have the chance to really adjust around that unless the consumer's bringing back in that pro installer to come back in and adjust it every time something happens in the house. And I would say that happens on occasion, but that doesn't happen most of the time. That's more the exception than the rule. And so what you had were these homes that when day one it was installed, it worked perfectly for the consumer, but over time it starts to lose the ability for it to return the value the consumer wants out of it because their lifestyles have changed. And so we can start to get into that. We talk about, being able to figure out these complex scenarios. So as I mentioned, I walk into the space, soft jazz plays at 5 p.m. My wife walks into the room, maybe something changes, or a kid walks into the room. Maybe that indicates that the soft jazz time is over and now we're watching television, or some other listening genre that goes along with that. We can also make sure that we're making the temperature be adjusted in the space so that it's comfortable in that space for those people that are there at that time and in that space. Learning those behaviors allows us to then make sure that lighting is the correct lighting for that space based on what I like, based on if I notice that there's more than 4 individuals in the house and the house only consists of 4 individuals. If there's more than 4, maybe I'm in entertainment mode. Now I want to adjust lighting based on the time of day to an entertainment lighting scene. So some of these things that we could then have this almost magical experience that occurs for the consumer in that home. If we think about safety and security, here's one of the areas where I think that this contextually aware space really adds a significant amount of value. Safety and security is a big concern. It's also one of the drivers, as I know the research will show and does show, often becomes the entry point for consumers getting into the smart home. It has a lot to do with safety and security most of the time. But if we know what's happening in the home and outside of the home, if we know who should belong in the home and who doesn't belong in the home, if we have the ability to understand, from looking at facial recognition, outdoor cameras, even indoor cameras, if we want them in those spaces, but a lot of homeowners don't, to understand what's happening, we can make sure that we're taking care of that today. Now, a lot of that exists. You see a lot of cameras have facial recognition, license plate recognition, object detection, and we can do that kind of thing. But if we add some more intelligence to it to understand, hey, during this time of the day, I shouldn't expect to see anybody that's coming into this space. So I only need to get notified if someone's in this space during this period of time. If we start to talk about true occupancy detection, we can understand who's in that space and who isn't in that space, and especially if they don't belong in that space, and make sure that we're letting that homeowner know, or that consumer know, what's happening in their space. Then one of the great benefits, the unfortunate truth about monitoring, security monitoring, is that security systems get activated or put into an alarm mode a significantly small percentage of the time when they should. And an alarm system should be armed anytime no one is in that space or in that home. It should get armed. Even if I'm running down to the local store for 10 minutes, I still should arm the system, but they rarely do get armed. And there are things you can do around geofencing and other things, but still requires input from the consumer. And at that time, the consumer also has to think through, if it alerts me, do you want me to arm the security system? I have to remember, are my kids still home? Is my husband or wife still home? And then be able to make a decision. But if the home knows no one's in the home, why doesn't it just arm the system? And when someone walks back in the home that belongs there, it gets disarmed. And having that happen for a consumer automatically would be such a dramatic improvement on how it works today, or how it doesn't work, because once again, some consumers don't actually arm their systems the majority of the time that it should be armed. Having sensors in the home allow us to be able to do things like we do today with motion and occupancy and temperature detection, but to make it intelligent around what's happening and contextually what's happening in there, and then making sure the home takes the action to keep those occupants safe and secure. It's a huge benefit there. Health and wellness is another one of the areas that I think where we're going to see these contextually aware homes have real big benefit here. We gave a couple of examples here, right? In northern regions where we get seasonal affective disorder, let's have the home adjust lighting to be able to try to counter that effect, to help diminish that effect. And that can be done through lighting. Smart lighting can do that for a consumer. Making sure that we can input other devices that consumers may already have, wearables, smartwatches, smart wearable devices. Let's understand what's happening. We may be able to detect, is a consumer in a stressed situation or feeling stress? Maybe the home can help get them de-stressed by playing audio video, or adjusting the lighting, or even adjusting the temperature to help relieve that stress. And then being able to take that information when it comes to things like sleep monitoring and understanding sleep cycles of not just one individual, but all the individuals in the home, and then be able to adjust the home to be able to get to a place where we can adjust and make that sleep schedule better through lighting, through temperature control, through other, even audio video, in order to be able to allow that person to get better sleep there. And then air quality, which has become another one of the inputs that we've seen in the smart home. A growing categories have been around being able to understand what air quality looks like within the home, but not only what's going on with air quality, but being able to mitigate that problem, either through the HVAC system, through fans, or through air purification systems. And being able to correct that, I think, is one of the things that we're going to see as an increase in demand from consumers, as they want to have those their spaces be more healthy and have wellness be a concern for them. And then energy. I know that was one of the things that was mentioned just earlier in this presentation, or earlier in our session here today. Energy is a big growing category for the smart home. Being able to have the home not only report to the consumer what their energy consumption looks like, but being able to adjust based on the inputs that are coming into it. And those inputs could be the outside weather, outside temperature, inside temperature, having the ability for it to be able to turn on and off devices to make sure we're being as conservative as we can with the energy monitoring. Being able to allow the consumer to be able to control of how energy efficient do you want to be, and then being able to have the home automatically adjust itself based on what it sees happening and what is actually happening from inputs coming internal and even external, as I mentioned before as well. Making sure that we're adjusting temperature to not only make it comfortable, but also to be economical, as it's, I think, widely known. HVAC is the leading consumer of energy within a home most of the time. And so having that be able to be adjusted to make it economical is a huge benefit. You can certainly do that with smart thermostats today, but this takes it to the next level. This brings in other inputs, brings into play not only movements from the house, but also learned behaviors that are happening as well. And then having lighting adjust automatically in the home and have it turn on and off. And then a big part that we're seeing, another growing category, and I know a lot of research is supporting this, is in smart shading. Being able to use that smart shading within the home to be able to detect outdoor temperature, is the sun up, is the sun down, and based on that, understanding, do I want to harvest the sun by bringing it into the house to heat a space, or do I want to be able to prevent the sun from coming in to be able to keep it cool, depending on the time of year, depending on what's happening in outside temperatures, and once again, depending on what is happening outside, and even learn behaviors for how I want my blinds to be. So there's huge benefits that I see from these 4 sections. Now, there are certainly others and a lot of other areas where we could think about where this contextually aware home is going. But honestly, I think we're getting really close to where we can deliver that. If we think about the benefits of this, so the benefits I think are pretty significant. From a pro installer's perspective, you get simple configuration. One of the things that I hear a lot of dealers talk to us about and integrators talk to us about is, in fact, if you look into another one of the fun little methodology, if you look into the amount of programming, what I'll call automation, not just, cause and effect, I press this button, this thing occurs, but true automation that goes on within the pro install world today, it's actually pretty small. If you look at most of the homes that are installed by our dealer networks, they tend to shy away from a lot of these because that's going to be the thing that you get a call back on. I set a schedule that it's going to go off at 3:15 p.m. and these are the 3 things that are going to happen. This light's going to go to 40%. This light's going to go to 50%. This thing's going to happen over here. And time again, that's the consumer's going to call back. I don't want that to happen. I want the light to not come on, or I want it to be 3:30 p.m. And having those adjustments, sometimes dealers shy away from just if I don't tell you it can happen, you're not going to call me back because you didn't know you could do it in the first place. And so we tend to see that a little bit, but simple configuration. If I could get the basic system set up for the consumer and then have the home start to learn what's happening based on the behaviors of the consumer, and you could tell the consumer just live normally in the home, and it starts to learn, it starts to suggest these things back to the consumer, that becomes an almost magical experience for that consumer, them being able to have that home adjust for them over time, which leads to less callbacks, leads to more satisfied customers. And then we start to get pull, because as you start to think about this, the more sensors, the more devices that can start to measure or monitor or be able to be an input into our connected system here, the better off that will be from that consumer's perspective. But it's also going to create demand for the dealer, for them to want these things in their home, to be able to get the best out of it that they can get there. From a consumer's perspective, simple operation. If I can make sure that the system does what I want it to do, and it can ask me about things that it wants to do based on my usage, that makes it easy as well. Now, certainly we need to make them easy to use at the same time too. Peace of mind. I need to know that the data I have is secure. I need to know that what's happening is my world and it's working around me. That's something I believe we'll be able to develop, and that others will be developing as we move forward. And then big part of this is that self-evolving home environment. So it's not just static. 5 years later, the home shouldn't work the same way it did 5 years ago. It needs to evolve based on, once again, the habits of those consumers, the changes in that consumer's lifestyles, the changes in that consumer's home environment at the same time. And then what this also will allow is that consumer to feel like they're getting more value out of that technology. If every day it's adding value and every day you feel the value that it returns to you, it certainly makes you feel a lot better about the technology spend you've made within the home. So I just touched briefly on a bunch of different topics and pretty quickly here, but it's an exciting, I think, future that we're heading towards. Once again, as I looked at this, almost 20 years ago, we thought about this world of, where the home's helping do these things for you. It's making sure it's adjusting to it, but the technology hasn't been there. We're finally getting there. And like I said, not too distant future, I'm confident we'll start to see these contextually aware homes be a real thing and something that consumers will start to want to have in their homes. So with that, I thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was really fascinating. And I'd like to open the the floor up for questions either in the chat box or by raising your hand in Zoom. I was going to start out with one. I think all of these advantages of context-sensitive spaces really very attractive, but do you think the public understands this yet? And how do you drive that understanding so that you can increase demand for these systems?
Yeah, I definitely don't think that consumers understand today, and it's something that will be hard to explain if I said, hey, this is what's going to happen. It's contextually aware, and these are the things. It's really going to come down to use cases. It's going to be, never have to arm or disarm your security system again. And behind the scenes, it's like, here's the things the sensors we need to put in. Here's the solution that we're putting in order for that to happen. But now you don't need to worry about it anymore. You step out of your house, you leave, it's armed. You step into your house, it's disarmed. Having that be it's led by the solutions rather than led by the technology is how we're going to have to introduce this to consumers.
This is Ken Wax. I think you're right on the mark, Paul. In the international standards, we should be in a position to publish next year our first artificial intelligent guided energy management system so that the energy consumption automatically adapts to consumer preferences, including consumer budget and the degree to which consumers might be concerned about their environmental impact. So the world you paint is actually coming to pass.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And I see that happening around us today. Like I said, pieces of this are starting to come together. Pulling it into a solution, I think, is the next step.
Great, thanks. I see Stephen has a question. Stephen Williams.
Please be sure to unmute yourself. Yes, Stephen Williams, your hand is up. Sorry, we don't hear you.
Yeah.
Well, his hand is down now. Maybe that was inadvertent.
Oh, okay. Any other questions? Lauren Silverman.
Yeah, hi, this is Larry Silverman. What is your feeling about responsibility for system failure? Let's say that you leave the house and the system doesn't arm the security system, and there's a break-in.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. What I would want to see, and what I would advocate for is if that system is being armed, I want to at least get notified every time it arms and disarms. So just a push message to my phone, tell me the system's armed. I didn't have to do anything, just informational. Now I know it's armed. I can have peace of mind around knowing it was armed. If I don't get the message, I would imagine there could be a fault that could happen. It's a technology. There's always things that can happen. But having that double verification there would be the thing I would want to have in place. And consumers could opt in and onto that.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that practical over a large number of users?
Yeah, it depends on I would say it depends on the environment. If we go into a commercial setting, there's certainly a list of caretakers that would need to have that kind of information. If I look at a home, it's usually a fairly small group of folks that would need to understand that system been armed and disarmed.
Well, let's assume that the part that fails is the door opening sensor. So you don't know that someone has left the house, so you don't know the system should be armed.
Yeah, I would hope that as we think through these sensors, and a lot of them today report their status, that I would get notification that there's a problem, there's a fault with that product as the fault was occurring. Now, it doesn't negate the fact that it could still happen, and I agree with you. But that is the same as it exists for any security system today. I can have that same type of feature that's there. If we go into the world of security, it's usually pretty clear what the obligations and liability are for both monitoring companies and alarm companies, which honestly is pretty small in a court of law, to be frank.
What happens in the event of a power failure where there's a blackout in the neighborhood?
Yeah, you have the same problem you have today. If you're not on a microgrid where you're storing your energy, which is another part of the growing part of the smart home, if you're not on that, then you're going to lose control of these things. Some of that can have battery backup. A lot of the security systems today do battery backup for both sensors. Sometimes sensors are battery powered most of the time, but for the base stations, will be battery backed up for some period of time. So the security system's up and going for.
The good news, Paul, is we're heading in a direction of more resiliency in energy systems. As distributed energy proliferates, there'll be more batteries and there'll be more ability to exchange power locally without depending upon a central grid.
Correct. And microgrids will play a big part of that. So
I think that dovetails into another question here that Stuart Sykes had in the chat. I agree that energy management is becoming a more important trigger for engagement than it has been over the last decade. Do you see energy providers and utilities as finally playing a role in smart home development?
that's an interesting question. If I step back into my history, 10 or 12 years ago, there was a lot of funding that was being issued out to utility companies for them to investigate smart energy control into homes. There were a couple of things that were thwarting that capability. Some of it was consumers not understanding the need or want to have a utility company understand their usage. I think that's changed somewhat over the last 10 or 15 years. And so I would say that, yeah, I think there's an ability for power companies and utility companies to get more involved in how that energy is being used. And that was going to be, I would believe, as an input into the system, into understanding my billing cycle and variable rate billing locations, having that sent out to my system as a message for it to know, hey, I'm entering a high billing period. For me as a consumer to be able to say, in that high billing period, here's my profile. These are the things that get load shed. Here are the things that are going to continue to work. Here's the offsets I may do for my HVAC system, either up or down based on that energy consumption. I see that's where the power and utility companies have the availability is for them to provide that type of detail, along with on-demand reports of energy consumption for that consumer.
Stephen is trying to raise his hand again. Stephen, you want to try? Someone is coming through with very garbled audio. I'm sorry, we don't hear.
I think that Stephen can actually, unfortunately,
Stephen,
we're getting.
may I suggest you use your telephone and call us rather than use Zoom to ask your question?
Yeah, we're getting quite a lot of feedback.
Yeah,
Stephen.
I think that's probably Stephen. So Stephen, please call us on a telephone line. We'll address your issue. Well, thank you very much, Paul. Very enlightening.
Yeah, you bet. It was my pleasure. Thank you very much. And if anyone needs to get in touch with me, I'm happy to answer any questions or get any input you might have into the process as well. So my best way to get in touch with me is p.williams@niceforyou.com.
Great. So any final comments on Paul's presentation? Otherwise, we'll move on to our next topic. Well, again, Paul, thank you very much for presenting and for handling the questions. I'm sure we could engage you much longer. Let's turn now to the White Paper Subcommittee. The good news is we're all caught up. We have no more papers in the hopper, and this is an opportunity for those of you that would like to contribute to the effort that CABA makes to produce original white papers. We generally do not focus on extremely detailed technology. We use it more as an overview of new areas, somewhat like the webinars, but in a white paper that might be 5 to 10 pages typically. If you have a topic, please let us know. We are here to help. We will set up a committee if you'd like to work with you on the white paper, to review your white paper, to add constructive comments, and then you will be a published author. So let me also tell you about the CABA Publications Review Committee, which I also chair. CABA, for the past, I'd say more than 10 years, has offered as a service to its members a library of papers produced outside of CABA. The CABA staff and members, in the course of their daily activities, come across papers that may be relevant to our industry. These papers are pulled if they show some interest for the Connected Home Council or the Intelligent Buildings Council, and then they are subject to a rigorous review. We have a detailed checklist of requirements for papers to be considered for entry into our library. We have thousands of reviewed and qualified papers that are in our library. Basically, our papers need to tell us something useful, either technically or in marketing aspects of home and building systems. Papers are allowed to mention commercial products. So a paper might say, here's a great technology. This is what this technology is all about. And by the way, my company is a manufacturer in this area, and here's info about our product. That we would find acceptable. If we flipped it around and said, here's a new product area, and we are the only game in town, and you can only buy it from us, we tend not to accept those papers because they've been turned into advertorials. So as I said, we have thousands of papers. Marta, do you have any stats on where we stand cumulatively and how we're doing this year?
We will have about 200 papers by the end of this year. I believe we're at about 170 right now.
So that's just additional papers this year. And we're putting this in a library that I believe is limited to CABA members for a few years and then is available to the public.
That's correct. That's correct, Ken. And I believe over the last 6 years or so, we're close to about 1,000 or so, but I'd have to just double check those numbers.
So this is an extremely valuable service that CABA offers to its members. So do we have any new business at this point for discussion by the Connected Home Council? This is your opportunity to suggest new webinar topics, new ideas for white papers, etc. Well, as we said earlier, anytime you come up with an idea, please contact Greg or Marta or me, and we will entertain your proposals. So Charles, if you would tell us about activities and announcements, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Ken. So some of the events that CABA has participated in over the past year, and that's one of the great benefits I think about CABA is all of these really great trade shows, conventions, other events like Connections virtual sessions that was in August, Connected Health Summit, and that was in August to October, our IES annual conference, the Shanghai Smart Home Technology, CEDIA, which my organization, we did attend also, Southwire attended, and very, very interesting show, LightSpec Midwest, as well as Greenbuild. And so all of these CABA has participated in over the last year. Didn't know if there's anything, Greg or Marta, you wanted to add to that or about those events. And then upcoming events, we've got CES, very large, comprehensive exhibition in Las Vegas, January 5th through 8th, coming up very soon. Our Connection Summit at CES and Parks Associates is going to be there, January 5th. And finally, the IoT Evolution Conference and Expo in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. That's in February.
Thanks so much, Charles. And I think, Greg, I'm not sure if you wanted to speak on our attendance. I believe we'll be attending CES in January. I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything to that, or we could just leave it off at that.
Yeah, we're actually we're holding a board meeting at CES in January, and actually a strategic planning session and a board meeting the 2 days prior to the actual CES event, and we'll be at CES as well, and we'll be attending the Parks event, and it's always a good time at CES. But we'll definitely be there if you want to meet up. Definitely send send us an email or a note in the chat, and we can arrange a meetup.
This is Ken. The last time I attended CES in person was January 2020 when there were almost 200,000 people and 4,500 exhibits. I attended virtually in 2021 and January of this year. I will be there in 2 months, in January of next year, and hoping to see that good turnout. I suspect trade shows probably will never be quite as big as they were prior to the pandemic, but hopefully there's a rebound.
I think they said they have 2/3 of their attendance so far, but I don't know. And you never know until you actually go there.
Plus, in the interim, the Las Vegas Convention Center grew by about 1/3 in additional floor space. So it's a bigger venue. Well, I think we're approaching the end of our meeting.
This is Larry Silverman. Can I interrupt to ask a quick question? Associated with CES, there was generally a military technology show. I don't know. One of the things I've been looking at is the application of smart home technology to both emergency first responders as well as in the military. Does CABA have any plans to participate in either, if there is a show around CES, that one or anything else in this space in the future?
I'll let Greg address that, Larry.
Well, currently we don't. We're not planning to attend. I wasn't aware of that show. If there is something related to sort of homes or buildings and sort of the military capacity, then we would be interested. But in the past, it's not something that sort of came up. But if you have any info, feel free to send it along, and I can take a look.
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, because it's by invitation only, and so it's hard to get a contact. I don't know, Ken, have you ever been to it?
No, the only show I've been to associated with CES has been the IEEE Consumer Electronics meeting that's usually held the week after CES, but it's really focused on leading edge consumer electronics.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it was the day before CES, and maybe it was for a couple of days before CES. But I haven't been in this, well, like you, I haven't been since it was a live show, and I've not only once.
CES is fairly early this year. I believe it opens on January 4th, and it's bumping right up against New Year's celebration. So it's going to be kind of tough to deal with shows that are on January 2nd or 3rd simply because of the logistics and the airlines and all that.
Yeah, that's what makes me think they may have moved it to a different date.
Well, yeah, typically they have it's like the 2nd and the 3rd and the 4th of like media days, but sometimes there's specific events that co-locate with CES that they hold in those times, so then people could still attend that event, but then still attend CES, and CES is on the Thursday and Friday, Saturday and Sunday.
So thank you all. Greg, is there anything else that you'd like to mention? Otherwise, we're near our adjournment.
I have nothing else to add, Ken.
And Charles, anything from your end?
No, thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank everyone for this gracious welcome as the new chair, and I look forward to working with Greg and Marta as we plan out future speakers. And remember, you have an opportunity to showcase your ideas, showcase your products as part of the webinar here. You also have an opportunity to write original papers through the Connected Home Council White Papers program, and you have an opportunity to get your already published papers put into the CABA publication library. So lots of opportunities that CABA presents for you to learn and for us to learn from you. So I want to thank you all for attending. As you can see on the screen, our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, February 21st of next year.